gonna be red flags all over this. Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Marissa Robertson. This is Self-Care Risks. And if you're new, a huge welcome. I am a licensed professional counselor who makes videos around my lifestyle and knowledge around mental health. And I'm so excited you guys are here today because today I'm going to be reacting to therapy horror stories. I've been in therapy for a good amount of time and I never had a terrible experience, thank God, but I know there's people out there that have. I'm gonna be reading some of those today. So I gotten some from Instagram. If you follow me on Instagram, I put on my story earlier this week asking for people to submit their entries on if they have therapy horror stories, and I got some good ones. I got some good ones today. But I'm also gonna be reading a couple I seen from Reddit because I got about maybe like 5 or 6 and I wanna do a little bit more. So I'll mix them up from Instagram, from Reddit today. So I'm so excited to be reading them today. I'm gonna be reading them off my phone to you guys. And we're gonna do some reactions. As a therapist reading this stuff, of course I'm gonna make my judgments and everything, but we're gonna talk about what's good practice, not good practice, everything. So let's get into this tea. I'm excited. So like I said, some of these I have read already just to scan it, and I also wanted to respond to that person and let them know that like I'm so sorry that happened to them. So I already seen a lot of these. Some of these aren't my initial reactions to them, but I'm gonna be showing you what I thought as I was reading them because I was just like reading like, huh? Of course, everyone's that I read today are gonna be anonymous. I'm gonna keep their privacy respected. Okay, so the first one I got is this one.
Hello everyone, this is Editing Marissa, and I just want to pop on real quick to give a quick trigger warning for the following topics in my video today. So please don't watch this video if you have triggers around grief, active duty military, alcoholism, physical abuse, trauma around sexual orientation and identity, or if you've been in conversion therapy, suicide, victim blaming, and trauma around healthcare. Okay, let's pop back into the video.
The first time I saw therapy, I was fresh in the Navy, active duty. Thank you for your service. And I had just lost my grandma. It was very hard on me. The guy that I seen told me to focus on my job and to put all into work and not think about the passing of my last living grandparent. I never went back. Didn't seek therapy again until 3 years later after the birth of my daughter. Okay, let's talk about this one. Why is this one horrific? I mean, other than you could probably guess. First of all, someone being active duty, that's already trauma in itself. There's probably so many adjustments and things that you're trying to figure out, and you're in a really heavy career, and then you lose your grandmother or just any family member. No. If I went to a therapist and they told me focus on my job, put it onto my work, that's so dismissive. That's just saying like, hey, I know you just went through all this, but like, you still got things to do. Like, huh? On some level, I do get because things still go on. We have to do the things. But for a therapist to not give you that space to say, hey, man, that's hard. How are you coping? Like, how are you getting through all this? Like, what's been really going on for you? Like, how is this impacting your work that you're going through? Like, those are such important questions to be able to process because, of course, you probably already know that you have to do those things at work and to focus on it. That's probably not a question to you. I would have really liked this therapist to have been like, hey, that's hard. How are you getting through all this? Like, let's find your supports. Let's talk about grief. Let's talk about like how you're gonna able to get through this really hard time. She never went back. Like things like that. That's why therapists have to be really mindful of what they say and how they can be impactful because like in this example, she didn't go to therapy for 3 years and she probably really needed it during that time of seeing her grandmother pass away, her last living grandparent. I'm glad that she went back and still had hope out for therapy, but that could have been some really helpful time for her in those 3 years. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, this is another submission from Instagram. So she said, girl. So I had a therapist last year that I was seeing through telehealth, so it was virtual. She was okay, not great. One session, I was talking to her and I was clearly getting emotional and looked at the screen and she was nodding off. I was thinking that she was agreeing with me, but I kept talking and the next thing I knew, there went her head and she fully fell asleep. I was so pissed. I ended the session and hadn't seen her since. What? Okay, I responded to this girl that messaged me this. I was being very transparent with her because I was actually just talking. I was just telling someone the other day about there was a time when I was an intern and I was like this close to falling asleep, just because I don't know if it was just a long day or whatever, but like I was super tired. I ended up not falling asleep, but I was like, okay, Marissa, sit up. Like there's a person across from us. And that's the thing, as I was reading this, is like, there is a human life across from you that is interacting with you and engaging with you. And it's not like you're just like off in a corner, like they can see you. And so the fact that like, yes, I understand being tired. You don't go into a session knowing that you are nearly falling asleep, especially when someone's getting emotional. That's the worst time. That completely ripped apart rapport for you two. I would have been pissed too seeing my therapist nod off. I would have been thinking like, is what I'm not saying important enough for you to stay awake throughout it? Like, what's going on? I can understand why you haven't seen her since, because obviously maybe this was a good fit. Maybe she wasn't in the right spot to be a therapist at that moment, but you definitely did not deserve her falling asleep in the middle of your session. So my next one is going to be from a Reddit story. So I have not read any of these. I just pulled up this morning because I knew I wanted to add something more to the other stories I got from Instagram. So you guys are going to be seeing my live reactions to these stories as I'm reading them. So let's get into it. This is from a thread on Reddit called Crazy Therapy Stories. When I was studying and suffering from a severe burnout, I went to the university psychologist. We talked for a while and I mentioned that my dad, who passed away a couple of years previously, was an alcoholic, and it made me sad to see him destroy himself like that. She then said, "So he beat you up?" My dad was a very gentle person and went out of his way to help people around him. This question was much out of tune with what I've been saying that I stopped going after that. I was suffering from insomnia. My doctor recommended a psychiatrist that I could try instead. I went a couple of times to establish that I was very introverted. As an exercise of expressing my emotions, she wanted to hit me with a pillow in her office as hard as I could. What? And she showed me how. I said that she couldn't make myself do that in front of her, and she was extremely displeased. But I guess it sounds stupid, but I really felt my boundaries were being violated by that demand. Yeah, they're being violated. So that was kind of two stories in one. I didn't realize I was reading it. So the first part was about her going to a psychologist at her school that just completely missed the mark of what she was saying about her dad. Like, just said that he was alcoholic and like was really struggling with that, and then all of a sudden you ask, "So he beat you up?" Is that what you heard? A lot of parts about therapy is reading between the lines with like their body language and what they're really trying to say. But she did not say anything about her being up at that moment. Like, what? Where did that come from? That makes me wonder if that therapist, like, maybe he knew someone who's also an alcoholic who beat someone else up in their family, or someone else she knew like that had that behavior, or did she experience that, like, that was related to her? What do you guys think? That's what I'm thinking, love. Like, because you don't just randomly ask that unless you have made those connections before. You know what I mean? The second part, that just sounds ridiculous. Like, you're hitting people with a pillow to bring out introvertism as a way to express emotions? Like, show me the research that says that is a good way to do that, because I have not heard of it. I've not seen her, haven't heard of her. I don't know if I will ever hear of her. So that's just odd. Okay, this looks pretty long. Okay, let's read her. So it says, when my late wife was very sick, I needed some help. So on the advice of my doctor from my school's mental health clinic, I started looking for a psychologist and a psychiatrist, one to talk with and one to prescribe medication if needed. Okay. I telephone interviewed 10 psychologists. I wanted someone who was both impersonal and understanding. Valid. I wanted someone I could tell everything without having to avoid subjects. One of these subjects was my atheism. I'm active in the local atheism community. My late wife was Christian. We made it work, okay? So one of the questions I asked was, I'm an outspoken atheist. Is this gonna be a problem? A few just said it wasn't a problem. A few said they were Christian, but they wouldn't let it be a problem with them. 3 of them declined to treat me, saying that they couldn't do so fairly. I think I really respected that answer. It is better than saying that it won't be a problem than having it become a problem. Okay, I can agree with that. I feel like my initial reaction is like, for me at least as a therapist, I don't care what background you have. If you're an atheist, you're a Christian, whatever your religion, not within my therapy practice to affect that. I can be whatever religion and shouldn't have any impact on what your religion is and how you practice it. So that was kind of my faith when I was like, but I think this person made a good point. I'd rather you say that up front rather than be like, okay, let's make it work, and then like your beliefs come out in the middle of a session, or you just later on, like you build a rapport, all of a sudden like you're like, yep, I can't do this, and then you let that person go. So I do get that part of it. Let's keep reading. I chose the guy who said, why would that be a problem? It just didn't occur to him that religious belief or non-belief would be a problem. He went to the person and said like, okay, that's not an issue at all, for the psychologist. As for the psychiatrist, I went to the one that my primary care physician recommended. She counseled me for a little bit to figure out if I needed medication. I did. He put in parentheses. Or I don't know if it's he. They put in parentheses. She was Hindu. She was very spiritual and tried to talk me out of atheism right there, not realizing that I was better informed than she was on different arguments she was using on me. I got her to agree to disagree, and it didn't really matter to me since she wasn't the one with whom I would be talking my problems through. She prescribed me antidepressants, and that was enough. Here's a takeaway. You are hiring a psychologist. They are not hiring you. You don't have to please them. Period. Get the person you need from someone who is honest and fair. But remember, they're human too, and it's quite possible for you to clash with them. That is true. Look for people who help you grow and who lead you to find personal insight, who can explain your situation so that you can see it from new eyes. Get someone who collaborates with you to help you cope, make you better. Don't get someone who tells you that you're wrong merely because you clash. Okay. I love the little wisdom at the end. These are my thoughts from this. Like I said earlier, like I'm that person who's like, whatever the religion is, I don't care. That has nothing to do with me. And so it sounds like one of them, at least one of them was like that. But the psychiatrist, she wasn't. She was spiritual and she tried to change him to something that he didn't want to change it to. He didn't go to shift his religion to another or to believe in something he already didn't believe in. For just to get support while his late wife was very sick and he ended up getting on antidepressants, which is good. But they're so right in the end. Like, yes, like there is a person across from you when you are seeing a therapist and they have their beliefs. They're not like some like empty vessel of a human body that like literally has nothing. Like they are going to have their own beliefs, and sometimes that does clash. Sometimes that person, that therapist has to be very aware of what they cannot do and can do. And sometimes those things are valid. But for the most part, therapists have to know that even though they are gonna have things that clash, that it isn't about them. It's about the client. And like this person said, you are hiring the psychologist. They are not hiring you. You are the client. This is your time. So anything that comes out of this is for you. So I like that. Let's get back into an Instagram story. So this is also about a university situation. This person said, I had an intake session at a counseling center at the college I went to. At the time, I was such in crisis. I couldn't sleep. All I did was worry. I couldn't think straight. It was horrible. I wanted to make sure they knew all about the things I wanted to talk about in therapy, and I wanted to make sure they knew the full extent of what I needed to work through, so I told them everything, okay? I told them things that no one in this whole world knows. Very deep things. The lady ended taking the intake session by telling me that they didn't have space for me to receive therapy, but they could refer me out. After I told that lady such deep things, I went home and didn't seek help for another few years. It was so painful and prevented me from getting the help I truly needed. She also went on to say that some of her friends had took it up with the university, and she also said, and what made it worse was that classes were told to promote the counseling center, and people came to classes and gave talks about the center and how to get help, and I was just like, wow. I told people not to go there because of what happened to me. It was just upsetting because I know so many of the students needed help, but they didn't have the means for it. Woo, okay. So, and I had told her this. It's so odd to me that they went through that whole intake session and were just like, yeah, we're gonna have to refer you out. I have experience with going to a college counseling center myself, and when I did it, and I'm sure, of course, it's only like one person like telling you what happened, but my experience, I did end up talking on the phone with them, giving me a brief, like just like saying what your presenting issue was, and they took that and was like, okay, like that's gonna help you like match to a counselor. Then they were like, I didn't have a whole session with them telling my whole life story, and all of a sudden they're like, well, we actually don't have everyone, so we're gonna refer you out. Thanks, bye. No, that doesn't work like that. Like even the place I work, the presenting issue, it's very brief, just to know that like, okay, we can see why you need counseling. And then we'll say like, yo, what's the contact information? We'll get all that stuff, get your intake in, and it's a paper form, not having a whole session. And then you will, once you actually get into counseling, at that point, you're put at least on our list. So like, if you don't get counseling, then you will hopefully at some point, our waiting list, and we have one, and then you will get contact with the counselor, and that counselor will have that full session. After that first session, that person is your client. Unless something goes terribly wrong, there isn't like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna refer you out because I actually have no room. No, we don't. It's not like that. I don't know how all counseling centers work, especially at universities, but that just sounds so backwards. Like how she said, there is so much that you don't talk about with other people that you do in counseling sessions that people have no clue about. There are so many things that like I know about my clients that like no one knows about. And that is why therapy is so important to build that like therapeutic and an empathetic space because of that reason. And so when you are transferring someone out or referring them out, it has to be done like in a warm way, not just in a cold like, okay, you just gave me all this info here. Like this person said, it prevented them from getting help when they really needed it, and it didn't go back until a few years after, like the first person we read about. These things are super impactful, and one person can really throw off the course of their help and treatment. Oh, okay. Let's read another one. This person didn't have a giant story, but they just mentioned that a counselor suggested that she go to conversion therapy when she came out. Now, I don't know when conversion therapy became a thing, like a popular thing for people to use. Like, if you do, please give me a history lesson. I remember learning about this, I feel like in my Women of Psych class, but I cannot remember, what was it, the 80s, the 70s, that it was like popping? It should have never been, first of all. Let's start there. But if you are someone in 2022 and you are telling your clients they're part of the LGBT plus community, please exit that career. Please exit stage left because you do not need to be a therapist. I and many other therapists I know are allies. If they're not a part of the community, they're allies. And the belief that you should change, I don't know everything about conversion therapy. What I know is that the purpose of it is to change you into a different sexual orientation, right? And to be straight, most likely. And that is not your place or anyone's place to figure that out. You are not the client. Even if you're not a therapist, telling someone they should go to conversion therapy is not okay. And there is something more with inside you that's going on than with them. And you have no idea. I mean, I probably even have no idea how much you are impacting how they believe about themselves and their sexuality and their self-esteem and everything about their body image, so many things. Like, there's a reason why in those populations the suicide rate is so high. And I bet that's a huge part of it. So if you're not a therapist that suggested that, big red flag. If you're the client who's seen that, exit. There's so many better therapists out there than a person who's gonna tell you to go to conversion therapy. Just gonna say that clearly. Okay. Let's pop back into Reddit. Let's see what else is going on around there. This one says, there was another, who I'm pretty sure was a narcissist himself. He had sessions in his house, which was obviously designed to show off his riches and social status. I know there's been times in history, I don't know exactly what it is, where people do home visits, but I haven't heard of any situations like that, like personally. So I don't know how ethical that is because it's not in a therapeutic space. Maybe I'll have to go through the ACA code of ethics to see if this is anything about that. But I just assume off the bat, like, I wouldn't want to have a therapy session in my own house or someone else's because like that just seems like not a non-biased space, if that makes sense. It's probably comfortable, but it doesn't make it seem like this is a clinical space where you go to get therapy. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? Anyways, but it was at his house. Like, having someone come to my house, and that's super personal. That's super personal. So I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. That sounds unethical. Anyways, even a sign on his waiting room that said it was strictly forbidden to touch lamps. What? He demanded to be paid up front before even considering letting you speak. And on the first appointment, he made you fill in a kind of standardized spreadsheet he used to determine the meds he was going to give you. He also refused to hear anything about my parents. According to him, my father's alcoholism was my father's problem and not mine, and I was here to speak about my own problems and not my father's. And then he insisted that my anxiety was just a problem in my brain, and it probably was just stress because of school and exams. I really hated that guy. I mean, I can see why. Because, yes, okay, but as a therapist, we have to know who's a client, right? If you come in, we want to make sure that you are getting the help that you need. And not just talking about everyone else in therapy that you think needs help. Does that make sense? But at the same time, a lot of those people contribute to our trauma. and we live with them, and they're really impactful, and they need to be talked about so we can get past the things that we are going through. So for someone to say that like that's just their problem, like that's their father's problem, not your problem, like, okay, technically yes, but like that is contributing to whatever problems they're probably going through. And just to say that anxiety was the problem in my brain, like what does that even mean? What? Like, yes, anxiety comes from the brain and the body and all parts of you, but like I think he's saying in this that it's being, I keep saying he, who the person is they. I think they're saying that like he was minimizing his anxiety to just that, and that like it didn't have much to even explore. It was just like, oh, this is just all in your head, like, which that's really messed up too, man. But they didn't off with saying that like not everyone's like that. Check the person's credentials before you see someone. I do want to have a video in the future about what to look for in a therapist when you go to find one, so let me know if you guys are interested in that video. Okay, let's go back to Instagram. What else we got? Okay, here's another one from Instagram. This person said, I truly believe in therapy, but my therapist isn't as engaging as I hoped for. But I try to chalk it up as to we were still getting to know each other. A lot of our conversations are very basic, some I could simply have with my friends. She shows me each meeting that she really isn't all into me, which is understandable because she expressed she hasn't taken on a lot of clients, possibly too many. Our last session she ended early because one of her clients were having a crisis because his dad was sick. I get that, but it made me feel like what I was saying wasn't as important. Yesterday, we were supposed to have a session and she never called or texted me. Before all this, she would cancel and ask me if I wanted to reschedule. I've been trying to give her a chance after chance, but I'm sure I need a new therapist. I would like a therapist that digs a little deeper, and I know that takes time, but I've been seeing her for about 4 to 5 months, and I don't truly feel like I'm getting what I would like out of this experience. So this is what I got to say about that. I had asked her like later on in my messages if they had gone on weekly, and she said yes. So to me, there's no excuse unless it's the client's issue. Like the client doesn't want to open up to why you're not opening up and building that rapport in session. 4 to 5 months, you're seeing a client weekly, 4 to 5 months. So that's 4 sessions a week, 4 times, 16. So you had at least 16 sessions with this person, and the rapport isn't built. You don't want to go deeper with some things. Like, and she's right. Those things do take time. Some people do jump into therapy and they're like, I want to talk about all the deep stuff. Like, here's my life story. Like, here's my trauma. And some people are the opposite. Some people are like, okay, here are the basics. It's going to take me time to trust you a little bit more before I can open up to you. Even though you are a therapist, it's even hard for me to talk about it in general, which both sides are very fair. But at that point, especially if the client's willing to be open and talk about some deeper things and go for it, like as a therapist, I'm exploring those things too. That's how ground really gets covered for seeing each other. After 4 or 5 months, I'm still talking about basic stuff. I'm gonna be like, where are we going with this? Like, what do you want to get out of therapy? Because if it's not the deeper stuff, if you're just there for like you have your anxiety managed, or like you're there because you don't really know what to do with school, or like something very, very light, and you're not in crisis, especially, I'm not seeing you weekly. I'm seeing you like every other week or monthly at that point. There's no reason why we should be seeing each other monthly and you don't want to talk about those things. But for this example, she does. I'm wondering what's going on with that therapist. And she alluded to like, she may have too many clients, which that needs to be a discussion of like, hey, I have a ton of clients on my client load, which if you do, one, you probably should change your frequency with some of your clients, and especially if they're not in crisis. But also that has to be communicated to your client that there is a big caseload. But also, it's not your client's responsibility for you to be able to do your job. Point blank, period. If I know I already have a giant client load and it's heavy, I'm not even open for looking for more people. I'm letting people know that I'm not available at this time. But the fact that you took her on and you have her as a client, and you have for 4 to 5 months, she is now your responsibility when it comes to what you're able to and what you're not able to do. That's not hers. She's just there to get the treatment that she needs. I'm telling you, This don't sound ethical. Okay, I want to go back to Reddit and see what we have here. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. My oldest brother was a big problem, but my parents either let him do what he wanted or he did it anyway, and they didn't do anything afterwards. To make up for it, they doubled down on me, and I wasn't able to do anything. What? I was sent to a therapist who did nothing but blame me for the problems in my family. Ooh, I considered it to be another adult, now 3 total, that blamed me for all their problems. I wanted a way out, and I trusted him though, and was honest. When I admitted how physically abusive my dad was, his response was, yeah, he's a pretty tough guy, but you gotta be careful around him. Huh? Okay, first off, not the therapist coming in and just automatically blaming you for everything. Like, what? I know it didn't say how old this person was, but it did say that they're youngest. So I'm assuming this is him like still like in his childhood years. So for not only having 2 adults against you or feeling as though they are, having a 3rd one come in, that's that therapist not taking consideration what's going on in a home. So what I mean by that is, like, for example, if a client comes in with trauma from healthcare, like other therapists, other things like that, I'm trying my tooth and hardest to make sure that I'm not someone that she can add to that list about trauma. So let's say that that client eventually has to be referred out to someone else for some reason. That transfer is going to be as empathetic and warm as I can possibly make it. If I go to that person and is like, yep, I'm going to refer you a very cold and hard exit, that's just going to add to that person's trauma, and that's not me taking consideration how this person experiences healthcare systems and support. I'm just further adding to that. And so the fact that this therapist came in was automatically like, you're the problem too, probably just like reconfirmed his trauma when it comes to like authority and adults that he was still stuck in. And there should be no blaming as a therapist. We challenge to say, hey, you're making a contradictory statement here. You just said this and I'm hearing this, or you're showing me this and I'm seeing this. That's how we challenge. But there's no blaming, saying like, well, you had it coming, like you should have expected that. Like, huh? That would push anyone away from therapy. It would push me away. I would feel sick as a therapist doing that. And then in a time when they finally opened up and said my dad was abusive, you just, yeah, he's pretty tough, minimalizing, dismissing, but you gotta be careful around him. Back to the blame. I'm sure he's already being careful because he's abusive. Anything, I'm sure what he was doing in that, I mean, I don't know the whole story, but I'm pretty sure that whatever he was doing did not mean that he had to be abused. So that therapist was not good. Okay, so this is the last one that I have for you guys today. It's one from Instagram, and this one was low-key a doozy. I was reading it like, what did I just read? So this person said, a couple of years ago, I was seeing a psychiatrist on a monthly basis. I was with her for about 8 months. She was very rude and curt with me, which sucked because at the time I had very active suicidal ideation. Every single time I would go in for an appointment, she called me by the wrong name or asked me something like, how was your grandma? When I never mentioned anything about a grandparent. She would always use the chart. Okay. Another thing that bothered me was I felt like a guinea pig. Every single appointment she asked, how are your meds working? And I would say I don't feel different yet because you need much more than 4 weeks before medication properly works. But she would completely switch out my medication with no weaning. I went from SSRIs to antipsychotics, which for people that don't know, SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And they're like the medication you typically get when you're on depression or something that is like limiting your serotonin, which is like what makes like that hormone that makes you feel good, like that happy hormone. To antipsychotics, which is exactly what it sounds like, something that when you have psychosis, something like delusions, hallucinations, you're seeing things like you really intense suicidal ideation and you believe something that's like not set in reality. Like those are a lot of times like why someone would be on the antipsychotics. So she went from SSRIs to antipsychotics with no weaning. That's intense. Imagine going from a medication that helps with like depression to a medication that helps with like hallucinations with no weaning. You just jump right into it. That's like someone, like, and I'm not saying these are her diagnoses, but to give an example, someone who has like depression disorder, like major depressive disorder, to someone who has schizophrenia. Those are big jumps. She incorrectly diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. I just felt insane. One time she prescribed me with a medication with an add-on that was supposed to act as a mood stabilizer. And for those who don't know too, mood stabilizers are a common medication if you have a mood disorder. This was called risperidone. I hope I'm saying that correctly. What I received was ranitidine. I hope I'm saying that, Retidine. Either Retidine. I'm gonna say Retidine is what it looks like. But obviously I thought it was the right one, and she was the only psychiatrist I knew that still did prescriptions by hand. So it was chicken scratch. Well, the following month, she asked how the new meds were, and I asked for clarification on what ranitidine was. She got really angry. She said that she didn't give me that. I calmly told her that she did, and turns out it was a medication for GERD. Some gastrointestinal thing. She immediately kicked me out of her office and claimed I was threatening her license, and said if I wasn't off the property in 5 minutes, she called the police. Huh? I'm laughing at the ridiculousness of this, not the situation. That's nuts. I didn't know my rights as a client at the time, so I ended up running to my car and sobbing. Oh my God. Okay, let's go back a little bit. Let's rewind. Okay, first red flag, you're rude and curt in the session. How is anyone supposed to get their treatment and the therapy that they want if you're being rude? No, red flag number 1. Secondly, you're still calling her the wrong name at 8 months in? There's gonna be red flags all over this. Let's count how many red flags I find in this. So first one, very rude and curt. You get an extra red flag because she had suicidal ideation, active suicidal ideation, and that's not anything to play with. You're one of the few people she probably had in her life at that time that was helping her get through that, and someone who had the tools to do so and the medications to help her. And the fact that you're creating the space for her while she had it, giant red flag. Wrong name, mentioned things that were irrelevant about her grandmother, didn't even say one word about the grandmother, still mentioned it. Messing up the chart. We're already at 5, we're only in the first paragraph. Felt like a guinea pig because the fact that she felt like an experiment in her therapy sessions, no. So 6. I won't give her this red flag for asking about the medication because I know that she saw you monthly, and I know that, you know, it's better to be safe than sorry with asking, so I'll not give her that red flag. I'm glad she was keeping up asking. But I will say, I will give her a warning, and that being mindful that meds don't just start working right off the bat. Like, that's your warning, miss. You get a red flag for no weaning from an SSRI to an antipsychotic, and you get another red flag for misdiagnosing her with bipolar disorder. She's at the 8. The 9th red flag is giving her the wrong medication and not realizing that you did, not being very attentive and focused on your work. The 10th red flag is the fact that when she asked about it and get clarification, because she's a client, she probably doesn't know much about it, is that you said that she was threatening your license, you kicked her out, and you didn't help her through that situation. 11th red flag is that was actually a medication for GERD, something with gastrointestinal issues. You are a whole psychiatrist and you're giving out gastrointestinal medication for antipsychotics? You should have taken your license away. That's probably why you felt threatened, is because you already knew that you missed that mark. And that she called the police, I'm giving you another red flag for that one, because this person was not a threat to the therapist, the psychiatrist at all. She said very calmly, asked very calmly what was going on with her. She didn't come in there threatening to like turn over her practice or nothing like that, or that she was any immediate danger. She was literally just kicked out on something that she was genuinely curious about with her treatment. Like, imagine how that affects you going to further therapy if you wanted it. She didn't say that she continued to go after that, but like, I could understand why she didn't because of that experience. Like, geez. And then, like she said, she didn't know her rights as a client at a time, so she ended up running to her car and sobbing. Like, that's just like unfortunate. Like, No client should have to go through something like that. Like, that is insane. I hope that that therapist really, one, felt bad about the whole situation. And like, of course, I don't know everything going on with that person, but like, that is so unacceptable. That is so unacceptable. There should at least been like some conversation, like some consultation with another clinician there. Like, hey, like, I messed this up. Like, what can we do for her? She was literally victim blaming that situation too. And that, not okay. I literally read that with my jaw on the floor. So okay guys, those are my therapy horror stories for today. I hope that you guys were just as shocked as I am, because some of those, I don't know what I was reading. I was really shocked by a lot of those. You shared them through Instagram. Thank you so much for sharing them. If you ever want to be someone who shares me a story, you can always contact me and DM me on Instagram at selfcarerisk, or you can email me at selfcarerisk@gmail.com and I will get all my submissions from there too. I'm really excited. I want to make this a series. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. I love making it. I'm so excited to keep making some reaction videos for you guys. So please just keep sending them in. Just like this video if you want to see more of these videos, my reaction videos. And please subscribe to my channel if you guys want to follow up with other reaction videos on my channel and just to stay in tune with all the other content that I have. Thank you again for watching and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!